Hi, and welcome to Asteria's Convos, where we are community, building the future. I'm your host, Asteria Elzea, hosting from land currently known as Los Angeles that has been tended for thousands of years by the Tongva and Chumash peoples. I owe everything I am to lands in the traditional territories of the Sauk and Fox nations. I acknowledge these ancestral tenders as a truth practice and reminder of the violence in our shared history, which has privileged myself and my farmer ancestors. Other identities I lead with are white, gender nonconforming, bisexual, and polyamorous. I'm newly discovered neurodivergent. I have CPTSD, severe generalized anxiety, and am chronically ill with Ehlers-Danlos. I've trained in connection and community building with Desiree Attaway, Beautiful You Coaching Academy, and in Carmen Spaniola's attachment-based, trauma-informed facilitation method. I have a work history in special events and as a stagehand. Plus, I'm a certified data analyst and practicing witch. I hope to explore all these topics and more on Asteria's Convos. So here we go! Hi, and welcome to Asteria's Convos, where we're a community building the future. I'm going to stand up and light a candle for our episode today while our guests introduce themselves and tell us what identities they lead with.
Great. I'm Jamie Frost, she, her. I find this question interesting. I think I tend to lead the most with my professional identities. I feel like that's what we're kind of taught to do, societally speaking.
Yeah.
So I tend to lead with that, which would be speech language pathologist, but more generally, clinician, therapist. And then I think after that, it's the best label for it, I suppose, is creative.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different creative things that I do, and I don't feel like a particular. I don't feel defined by any one of them. I don't feel like a musician. I don't feel like a costumer. I don't feel like a painter. But I do feel like I do all of those things as part of my identity, and so I just say creative.
Yeah. And you definitely do all those things.
I try.
Yeah.
I guess that's me. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Christine Hassay, also she, her, also a speech language pathologist. That's not what we're here to talk about today. But I guess that's also interesting. I don't know if I lead with my professional identity as much. It depends on the circle. It depends who I'm meeting. But it's also a newer identity to me. So
Yeah.
it's not one I'm used to leading with. Because I was in the film industry for so long that the like switch to going back to grad school and becoming an SLP, speech language pathologist, is newer. So yeah, I probably lead with LARPer more than I lead with speech language pathologist. But yeah, I guess like for a long time led with performer. Or I would be a slash person, actor, writer, producer, slash, slash, slash.
Yeah.
And now LARPer SLP.
LARPer SLP.
LARP SLP.
Yeah, now we have acronyms.
Yeah. There's 8 letters after our names, but really there should be 12.
Tell us, what's speech language pathology?
I think we both snickered because it's such a broad question. The field is very wide and encompasses a lot of different things. I think different people have different ideas of what it is based on whether or not they've encountered one in their lives or their loved ones' lives. So the two most common ones that I say, oh, like when people hear I'm an SLP, they say, oh, like blank. I hear, oh, like you work on lisps, like you
Okay.
fix people's lisps. And then I think the other one I hear is, oh, like when somebody's had a stroke, because I think a lot of people had like grandparents that had strokes that interacted with them in the hospital. And the answer is both of those things and also at least 18 more things.
Yeah.
Broadly speaking, we deal with a lot of different disorders that deal with anything to do with speech, language, voice. Sort of, I when I explain it to people who are in the room with me, I put one hand over my head and one hand under my like above my collarbone, and I say anything that's wrong from here to here. And I'm
Yeah.
exaggerating a little bit, but
On the podcast, I was gonna say we deal with disorders from the neck up. I mean,
yeah,
because it can be cognition too. So, like,
right.
we can deal with, you know, memory and attention, but we
Mhm.
also deal with swallowing, and then, we I guess it's not accurate from the neck up because 'cause we're not ENTs. We're not ear
Right. I was say it is. There
Right,
is some differentiation of like we're not
right.
doctors, we're rehab therapists or developmental therapists for disorders from the neck up, but it's a really, really broad spectrum. And some people do a lot of different things within the spectrum, and some people do, just one thing they're really specialized in.
And
They're
we
just
also work with people on the spectrum, so we could say spectrum and it's twice.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we basically because we work with social language as well. So
Mhm.
we work with speech, language, voice, fluency, cognition, swallowing, yeah,
Do you say fluency, like stuttering
fluency
disorders
is
or speech?
stuttering, like stuttering disorder,
Hmm.
fluency disorders.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
It's like a 5-minute explanation.
that's a lot clearer to me than it was, and I've known you both for a
Yep.
year. So, here we are.
It's a lot.
But it's a lot of different things, and both of your jobs that I know about personally are so different from
Yeah,
this
for
world.
a while, we had jobs that were pretty similar for the
Mhm.
Yeah,
last,
and
like,
overlap when
year.
we were both working at a private practice. Like, pediatric private practice was our overlap.
Mhm.
But now we're a little more differentiated because Jamie still works in a hospital sometimes, and I'm in a school now. So now we've diverged paths a little bit, but there's still a lot of overlap in that we each message each other
Yeah.
with some frequency, being like, where do you think our scope lies here? What would you do in this situation?
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
multiple times a week, I'm sending you a message or sending me a message of, like, "What do you think about this assessment?" Or,
Hmm.
"What would you do in this case with a client like this?" I think I sent Christine one today, like, at,
And
like,
I
4
sent you one
PM.
yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens.
Okay, so you guys are excellent at collaborating on your jobs that you don't do together. But, like, you're here to talk about your work in the world in a different way.
Mhm.
So, what did I bring you here for?
Collaboration
Yeah.
in a creative endeavor. I
Yeah, we put on a play in a backyard, and Jamie
Yeah.
and Christine were the co-directors.
We put on a play in my backyard, which is such a gift to be able to do in the city of Los Angeles, to have a backyard big enough to do
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Not super common, and to fit, like, we had probably, I didn't actually count, and we didn't
Mhm.
take like a ticket counter or anything at the front, but I would say like probably 70 people in the audience, and we could have fit more.
Yeah.
And the yard still had plenty of space to like walk around and have the booth and have a concession stand. And so we had a really big space, which is part of what inspired me to do it in the first place. But yeah, Christine and I have been collaborating on many things over the years on smaller and larger scales, but this is definitely the biggest one in, like, I guess in this manner, where it was like structured and scheduled and come over to my house at specific times for rehearsals
For
and
that long. Yeah. We've
yeah,
had other, like, structured, scheduled things, but but then they usually fall under either the umbrella of somebody else's schedule, like, make a thing for this festival, but we're not running the festival. We're building a thing for the festival,
right.
Mhm.
or something that we're collaborating on in terms of a creative endeavor of, like, the party or event we're putting on for our friends, and maybe we're working on it for primarily a week and a little, like, decomp after and a little prep before, but this was months instead, like months of work and coordinating, and plenty of people helped, but it may also have been the first time that Jamie and I were like shared co-leads without maybe a bigger team of people that would be considered leaders, I guess.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
everything came down to the two of you.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we had other people taking lead on a lot of projects and pieces of it, but they were still referring back to us. We were the people who answered all the questions.
Yeah. You had a production team.
Right.
Mhm.
A lot of that kind of fell together. I have on my list of things to do differently next time to try and establish a little bit more of that team earlier in the process rather than having it sort of fall into place. But that's
I
getting on
think
a
it was,
different
I think it
tangent.
was hard for everybody to imagine how big and official it was going to feel.
Mhm.
And I don't know if this was part of your rationale, Jamie, or if I'm just projecting from my own experience, but I think sometimes before you feel legitimized in a project like this, it's hard to ask for help because it feels like a favor.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
having done it once now where people saw it it's and we're like, wow, this really was a thing. Like this was extremely legitimate. This was real theater. This was something that I would have paid to attend. Now I think people are more excited to help as opposed to feeling like we're asking a favor of them. So I feel like next time it's something that if we asked, like, do you want to be a department head on this project? I hope people would more get the sense of like, "Ooh, I wanna be involved," instead of, "Oh, I guess I'll do this favor for my friend."
Yeah, I definitely felt like that in the beginning. Even with making rehearsal schedules, I was like trying to be really cautious. And part of the reason I chose the play that we did, Almost Maine, was so that it felt less imposing on people's lives and
Mhm.
easier to
Mhm.
schedule. And it did feel a lot like asking a favor of like, come be in this backyard production
So
for me, with me.
let's start at the beginning with how long did you guys spend on it and how did the process look?
The idea first came about after a conversation with a friend about, actually, with one of my partners, about how much we miss doing community theater, how we both grew up with it in other parts of the country, in more like suburban parts of the country. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, and I grew up with a lot of community theater, with like a children's community theater and other community theaters where, there's a cast of 12 kids, and the guy playing my dad was an accountant, and the director was a guy who worked for the rec center and did a lot of artistic direction for the whole city in different capacities. And
Mhm.
but it was very community theater,
Yes.
and that doesn't exist in the same way in Los Angeles, because everyone here, not everyone here, but so many people here are professional creators, performers, and a lot of community theater ends up becoming that. It is acted in by people who are trying to do this for a living and looking for artistic outlets and projects. And it's harder to find what I feel like I had growing up.
Mhm.
And I realized on a drive one day that I could just make that. like I didn't need like permission. I had the space. I think that was also
Yeah.
realizing I only lived in that house for a year. So realizing, I think around August, I realized, oh, I have the space for this. I could just do it. I don't
Yeah.
need walls to make a theater. I have a big yard. And if we do it not when it's scalding hot, instead we did it in the freezing cold. If we don't do this when it's like we might kill somebody, then we can do this on our own. And I had the idea driving to LARP from Orange County, and I was in the car and I got to site and I texted like 4 different people, and the first one was Christine. And I was like, I want to do a play in my backyard. It's this play. Will you direct it with me?
Aw.
Um And then immediately went to site where, a lot of our live friends are former theater kids. And
Mhm.
so I went and found like 3 or 4 of them that I knew would be interested and was like, I'm going to do a play in my backyard. Do you want to be in a play? So I think that was August.
Yeah, I think August is right.
But we didn't really get the ball rolling for a little while. Do you remember when
Well, we had initially, it was more like just the 2 of us, like, we met to do a read through of the
Mhm.
play, and those were more, like, casual meetings. I'm pretty sure, let's see. I think that was in August, actually. I'm looking at my calendar now 'cause that's me. I'm a very calendar-oriented person. We did our first meeting on August 29th, 2024,
Mhm.
but we didn't get around to involving other people in, like, what we called auditions until
Mhm.
November. But we so, Au August 29th was our first sit down, and then November 16th was when we started to involve other people. I put auditions in loose air quotes because we weren't really doing, I guess, selective auditions. It was more, if you have an interest in this show and we've reached out to you, we have space for you. So you can show your interest by coming to this audition day, and we'll watch you read and find the place that we think you fit best.
I think I
Uh,
ultimately added the word workshop to the event, like audition workshop, because it really was more of a where do you fit in it? Like, are you interested? I'm not kind of harkening back to like the community theater, hometown community theater aspect of it. Like, I'm not necessarily looking for people to have professional level skills.
Yeah.
I just want somebody who's excited and interested and wants to perform.
Well, and a lot of people that you asked to be on the cast had no experience performing.
Yeah.
it was a really wide range. We had from, "This is my degree in theater,"
Mhm.
to, "I haven't performed since I was an ant in," and I mean, like, ANT, playing an ant in a little, what was it, kindergarten play?
Kindergarten play. Yeah.
Kindergarten.
Yeah.
So, some first-time performers and some professional performers. So it was a very wide range.
You got your community to work on something from mid-November through the busiest time of year in
Mm.
December.
Yeah, we didn't have our first auditions until December 10th, and we only snuck in a few before everybody was gone for Christmas and New Year's.
Mhm.
Our
And
first
then we're
auditions or
firing
rehearsals? Because
lots of
auditions were November, right? You said first
yeah,
in January,
auditions were in November.
and then first rehearsals in December, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the
And
the
then through
day mid-November, first rehearsal day mid-December, and we only did, like, I feel like a span of maybe a week where we got a few first rehearsals in before it was really just winter break and poof, everybody was gone and unavailable.
yeah, and then Los Angeles caught on fire.
Hot on fire. Yeah,
So that was
and
a lot.
that
We
was a
did
whole lot.
we did
And
not get
we
back to things until a
late
month later.
January?
Like, I think maybe January 20th was
Yeah.
Mhm. And
I think we maybe snuck a couple rehearsals in, not looking at the calendar, snuck a couple
mhm,
rehearsals in after winter break,
yeah,
but it was, like, maybe 1 or 2. It
mhm,
wasn't very many at all, and then the whole city caught on fire, and everyone was evacuated or trying to avoid the air or, spending their whole days talking to family or, in some cases, dealing with family members whose houses had burned down, and so we didn't I think we had a brief conversation about, do we push it? Do we postpone? Do we find another weekend? I think the answer ended up being no, because we just we kept looking at the calendar like part of the struggle here that we've known since the beginning is coordinating 19 different adult schedules, and this was the we booked this weekend back in November. We told people to hold the weekend, and everything else is not workable anymore. So if we want to do this before June, we should try to push
continue
forward.
to do it. And why'd you choose Almost Maine?
A handful of reasons. I directed it in high school as part of a like student director project. I had like a theater track in high school, and as a senior, it was like a project. Like the last couple years I was at that school, they started doing the senior in the graduating class directs a show.
Mhm.
I don't remember if I picked it then or if it was picked for me, but I directed it when I was like 18, and I loved it. It was such a great experience. I thought for a while that I wanted to do that professionally, be a theater director. I was surprised by how much I loved directing more than performing because I'd been a performer since I was a kid and I'd always be the one on stage, but I hadn't really done a lot of directing
Mhm.
up until that point. But I loved it a lot. So that show stuck with me. And then it was a natural choice for this because one, it's really at its heart like a black box show. It's
Mhm.
not written to have a ton of special effects. It's not dependent on moving parts or elaborate sets or, need a staircase or it doesn't have a lot of requirements
Mhm.
for staging. And all of the scenes are two people. There's one scene that has a third character that pops in and out but isn't present for the majority of the scene, which was a benefit because, like we mentioned, 19 adult schedules. Really
Yeah.
hard to get more than two people in a room at a time.
And I think when we had categorized the play more as an imposition on our friends instead of something cool we were doing for our friends,
Mhm.
Yeah.
we thought, gosh, how can we get people to commit to enough rehearsals to pull this off? So, with everybody only being in one or two scenes, then they really, if you're in one scene, you rehearsed 2 to 3 times before the weekend of the show. And then for our one performer who was supposed to be in 2 scenes from the beginning, I think only had 2 rehearsals for one scene, 3 rehearsals for the other scene before the weekend of the show. So it was a low commitment for our actors. Heavy commitment for us was
Yeah.
not what we thought through because
Mhm.
out that if you have everybody having separate rehearsals on separate nights, we were still there. So
And I think part of my initial idea of having two directors was like, oh, we'll split off, we'll take scenes, like she'll take some, I take some. But we started doing rehearsals together, and I liked having somebody to back me up. So, not like back me up, but like I liked somebody to bounce ideas off of and collaborate with. And,
Mhm.
also just share the responsibility of somebody be here working with them. I'm going to go do something else really quickly, maybe get a prop ready or make tea or something, and we didn't have to like completely stop rehearsal for that, but also having just two pairs of eyes, two pairs of opinions, two pairs of artistic viewpoints on things was, I think, really beneficial. And so I ended up not actually pursuing that most of the time. I think there are a couple of rehearsals where we did end up splitting off because the other person really couldn't be there.
Mhm.
There was one rehearsal where we were both present for the beginning, but then I ended up not feeling well part of the way through. And Christine was like, go lay down, go to sleep. I got it, which was really great.
yeah,
Yeah.
or you were watching a baby, or I was
Yeah.
in a meeting. We had, like, a few different rehearsals where one of us ended up being more present, but
Hmm.
for the most part, I agree that I not just in this show, but in general, I tend to prefer a collaborative environment, like writing with a partner instead of solo. It's always just appealed to me better. I feel like my brain is at its best when it's bouncing ideas off of someone else.
Yeah.
Uh, so I really liked that.
How do you guys think that you built the kind of community that was receptive to this idea and wanted to do it without feeling like it was an imposition, but rather was like, I'm grateful to do this with my friends?
Well, we didn't know for a while how people felt about it, whether or not it was an imposition, but I think I trust now my imposter syndrome that people did actually want
Yeah.
to do it. But, I mean, I can't say we built the community for the show. I think
No,
we're
no.
the community that is really into this. I mean, we had discussions about like who we wanted to ask. So like we have a pretty big community, and we each have had a hand in building the community, but not single-handedly. I I think that we are part of a big community of creatives and a big community of people who say yes and to a lot of things.
Mhm.
Many of the performers were LARPers, not all, but that kind
Mhm.
of, even if they weren't actors, they have a sort of like creative on your feet, explorative personality type. And we just sat down together and bounced around names because we have a pretty big network at this point. And so we just threw out names that we thought would be people who would be yes and personalities for this kind of project. And maybe they were people that we knew used to perform and missed it. Like we had quite a few people in there that were like, oh, I know this person really misses theater or misses acting and would really like something like this. And then the names on there that were not prior performers, I think just were people that we thought
The
like
people we reached out to and who responded positively, or in some cases, like as we were going through our Rolodex, thinking like who else could we get? We need somebody to fill this role or this type of role. And some were like other voices that as we were reaching out to certain people, they mentioned it to partners or they mentioned it to friends. And then those people contacted us and were like, oh, hey, I would love to be involved in that also. So there's a couple of those also, which was really great. But yeah, like Christine said, a lot of the community is people that we've met or people that we've met through people that we've met at LARP,
Mhm.
which is just a refuge for former theater kids in a lot of ways.
That's
There's
fair.
plenty of other types of people there too. It's not exclusively that, but it is that
former
I've heard.
kids and people that should have been theater kids.
Right. People who missed the opportunity to be theater kids and now we're giving them one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I've heard some people describe this of when they've talked about how do I put Twin Mask on a resume and make it sound more professional. I've heard people describe it as an immersive improvisational theater project.
Yeah.
Which is in a lot of ways what it is. But so there's a lot of people who are
Who are
are
ready for theater in there.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
What was it like? Like, I know you ran into more challenges.
Mhm.
How'd your community show up for you through those?
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think like just being really ready to step in and help and fill gaps.
Mhm.
Like one of the biggest challenges that the show faced was a very unexpected health emergency for one of our cast members
Mhm.
uh, on the day of the show. So, no forewarning there. And because we had been a show that wasn't imposing on people's time, we didn't have understudies. We weren't asking anybody to rehearse or prepare for something we didn't think they were going to go on stage for.
Mhm.
Uh, so, that was a scary moment for the show and sad moment for everybody worrying about our friend and cast member.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we just had another cast member who was familiar enough with the scene because of helping out with the stunt choreography on that scene,
Mhm.
happened to kind of fit the type, just in that at least there was a big beard.
Very important to the visual of the
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
Weird.
And just, like, stepped in on the day of and was rehearsing for, like, all
All
afternoon,
day.
evening,
Yeah. He
every
jumped right
possible
into
time.
it. And he also had a baby. He's a parent and had a baby who was present at the show for part or not at the house for part of the day while we were getting ready to the show. So, then his partner and his in-laws stepping in to make sure that he wasn't the one holding the baby all day so that he could learn the not like learn the lines, but like become more comfortable and familiar with the lines and the scene. And every time I turned around, he and his scene partner, who also really jumped at, okay, yeah, I'm whatever you need. We can rehearse every single moment from now until the show goes on, if that's what you want to do. And was very patiently running through the scene and guiding him through blocking, and it made a big difference, and the scene went up, and it was great. It was
And I think people were also, like, really willing to do that kind of thing because the more they saw of what everyone involved had put together, the more excited they were for it and
Mhm.
wanting to give their all. So, Jamie, a lot of credit to you too, because I feel like it wasn't just seeing other people's scenes or feeling how their own scenes were coming together, but the visual atmosphere that you created. Because Jamie's visual design for the show was just really incredible and really transformed the backyard in such a way that even though we didn't have a platform stage, we had this just it did feel like a theater, and also not just any theater, but one specific to this show.
Mhm.
And Asteria, you helped with some scenic painting that really helped with the backdrop, but Jamie's visual design overall, I mean, there were snowbanks, it just I think when people walked into that space that final week of rehearsal, it really cemented, "Oh, we're part of something serious. We're part of something that's a big deal. There are lights, there's a soundboard, there's so much more than we expected." Even the people who were performers or who had degrees in theater were saying, "This is more legitimate than a lot of the shows that I've done.
yeah,
I never had a lav mic before."
right.
Uh, and so there was, I think, a very big sense of importance that week. And so I think, not that I don't think that they would have been dedicated previously, but I just think it all kind of is additive.
Mhm.
So knowing that everything felt a little more legitimate and serious and professional made everybody want to be legitimate and serious and professional.
I
And
think but like it really reminded me a lot of high school theater, doing theater as a teenager. In I we did a lot of rehearsals in like weird spaces like dance studios, or sometimes on the stages we'd be performing on, but often in like other rooms of whatever community space we were in. A lot of like church auditoriums and cafeterias and stuff like that. And I remember tech week was always so cool and so exciting and really really stressful because you're putting in a lot of hours and work and everything's kind of coming together all at once, but also really exciting because you got to see the space with the lights and the scenery, and it felt real. It got to feel like a real show and a real performance, and it was cool to have an opportunity to create that feeling for other people too. And it's been so long since I've done something like that, so it was really neat to see that happening in the actors and seeing like lights turn on when they showed up for rehearsal in the last week of like, oh, whoa, this is more than I expected.
Yeah. I
And
think
also seeing
there's
people come into the space and have reactions too.
yeah, there's also you created this extremely professional, legitimate production, but also we did it with materials that anyone could recreate, most of them, right?
Mhm.
Like the lights we ended up using were from Amazon, and the snowbanks were stunning. They were made of chicken wire with batting over them for snow, and then Jamie did glitter and spray stuff on it
Mhm.
to make them look more like snowbanks, and those
Yeah, you went
ideas
and
stayed
sourced
that
a bunch of
line.
that from the craft store. It was all like there's a thrift craft store close to where I live in Pasadena that
It's called
uh,
Remainders. Shout out
it's called
Remainders.
Remainders Creative Reuse. They also donated a bunch of like we purchased a bunch of stuff for them, but they also donated these like fabric roll tubes. If you've ever bought like big bolts of fabric or seen those, there's these big thick cardboard tubes that go in the middle of them
Mhm.
that they gave to me to build trees out of.
Yeah.
Sadly,
And
just
we built
donated. We didn't pay for those.
Christine's husband, Jordan, spent all week working on this design for cardboard trees, cardboard Christmas trees or pine trees that were all around the yard, like giving the whole feel of being in Maine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a really cool piece of the vision to have to life, was having these trees around the yard. We had a couple like Christmas, just reusable Christmas trees,
Mhm.
but we only had two. And I was like, I want as many as I can get.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go buy a bunch of Christmas trees, but Jordan helped design and then create these Christmas trees that operate almost like an umbrella, where you can hoist the branches like a sail, and they looked really cool, and they lent a lot to the space. And yeah, so there was a lot of just being really creative with what we had in true backyard theater style, because we also aren't really working with any sort of existing budget. It's just
It's
whatever
just your
money.
money.
Yeah,
Or
just whatever money I and or other people are willing to put into it,
Mhm.
which isn't a lot, and was trying to mostly spend like big dollar or bigger dollar purchases on things that we can use in the future. So things like the lights.
Mhm.
There's a lot of like smaller purchases that were things that unfortunately needed to be disposable, like the all of that fluff that we used for the snow was never going to be retrievable, unfortunately, because of all the dirt and persimmon that fell out of the tree. And
Very,
um
very important one-time use purchases of hot chocolate and apple cider.
yes, yeah,
Yes.
it's a lot of
People
stuff
love
that
the hot.
people chipped in for. And then also that concession stand, we had a sort of tip jar that allowed people to chip in and help with the financial part of it.
Well,
um
yeah,
and
and I
people
had
were
a
very
friend that
generous.
donated us the flats for the
Yeah,
background.
yeah.
So that was great too. And the mics were from a friend
On loan from a friend, yeah.
who used them
Yeah.
for, let
And
us use them for
The
free.
other lucky thing about having the community that we have is we do have a lot of creatives in the community, and many are film professionals or, otherwise creative that have materials that were valuable and useful for
mhm.
the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, very. And that final week of trying to pull together a lot of the tech elements that was also plagued by rain. The I think like we had a rehearsal Monday, and then Tuesday through Wednesday it rained.
Yes. Yeah.
Tuesday,
It
Wednesday,
like
and
hasn't
Thursday.
rained here all year. And then it rained
Yeah,
that week.
super dry rainy season, and then which led to all those fires happening, and then it rained 3 days the week of the show, which was when we were going to try to be outside building those snowbanks and putting the flats up and painting them and putting the lights up and running the sound and getting all those things ready, so that when we had tech rehearsal on Friday, it was set and ready to go. And we did not have that nearly as much as I wanted. And we ended up doing a lot of it on the fly, which is another way that community really showed up when things were hairy. Landon, who we cast as Pete in the show, we didn't ask him to do any technical work for the show, even though he's very, very skilled at that. We just had him as a performer. But then when we were dealing with mic issues during tech rehearsal, he was just there. He was in the booth the whole night, troubleshooting the mics and, seeing, do we need to move the receiver forward? Can we hang it on a pole so that it's not so far away and we can still have the booth way in the back, but then the mics be able to reach the stage? And when are we losing the signal and how can we get it back? And he went online and plugged the mics into the computer and find, oh, there's all these settings that if you download this program online or access it on the web, you can change the settings on the mic, and that fixes all these problems, like stuff I would have never known how to do, or at least had the time to figure out how on the fly.
Right.
He just like had these skills and jumped in without hesitation, fixing all of those issues. One of our other very technically savvy, skilled friends was going through like a big personal life event that week and thought that they weren't going to be able to commit time anymore, which was completely reasonable and we were super understanding about, and did drop out of his part in the play that had like lines in the actual scene, but still showed up in a huge way for all of the tech, for setting up lights, for making sure everything was running smoothly, and that I wasn't going to make the house explode by plugging things into the wrong circuit breaker, overloading a power strip or whatever, and making sure all of that was running smoothly. And there were a
Well,
lot of bumps on Friday night.
a lot of them, but the way that he showed up, I think also ties back into, what makes our community, and what brought people together for this show, because it I think that there's a very big difference between when he decided to come back and help on that night. It wasn't, "Oh, I don't think the show can make it without me." It
Mhm.
was, "I just don't think I could imagine missing the show." Like,
Mhm.
I can imagine not being there. I can't miss it. And so it was not obligation, it was desire to, like, be a part of the
Mhm.
passion and the, like, creative output that we as a group of friends have, and, like, wanting to be there, wanting to be involved because it feels good. It feels good to
Yes.
be involved, and our community is so great that it feels good to be putting our creative minds together, and so that was a big honor too, to see, like, even during an incredibly hard week, it was not like, "Oh, I have every valid excuse to bail." It was, I just feel like I want to be there. I feel like I need to be there.
Yeah, that was a really cool aspect of the show that I'm glad we're highlighting in this conversation. I don't think maybe I've thought about as much too, was how much it shifted my mindset from this is a favor to this is a collaborative project that we're all doing and benefiting from,
Yeah.
and that everyone is enjoying. And I think that that was a hard shift for me to make during the process, but something that was really apparent when the show went up and day of the show. And we had a lot of, like, also seeing how many people showed up to watch, like how many people were there to support their friends and their family. And we had people's parents there, and we had, friends from the community, friends from different parts of different community, like kind of connected, but also disconnected pieces of the community, friends that we don't often see in the same room together.
Yeah, I
Oh.
had friends that came because they love me, but don't I mean, maybe have met you guys, but mainly just know and love me. They're my family
Yeah.
and came. Yeah. Also, another aspect of the week of things that's important to me to mention is that I had a panic attack the night before the show, and I was going to go on and was so grateful for the opportunity to perform and really wanted to do it and had been working for months on it. And then I was so overloaded with the circumstances of the big life event
Mhm.
that affected many of us that I ended up having a panic attack. And everybody was fully supportive. Like, I'm going into it and trying to do lines with my scene partner, and I'm forgetting every line. And I'm like, hold on, I need to stop. I'm having a panic attack right now. And like sat down on the floor and started crying. And my scene partner sat with me. Another friend of ours sat with me, kind of rotated out, spread, like, passed on messages for me throughout the night. Various people rotated out. So there was always somebody with me until my husband came and picked me up because I couldn't drive upset.
Mhm.
You and I had a minor thing, but you immediately like understood the circumstances better and then apologized to me. And it was an excellent apology. And like our relationship just came out stronger because of that. And I just like having the kind of community that shows up in rotation, that's willing to say, I did that wrong and apologize for it. One of our friends who picked me up the next morning thanked me for asking for a ride because he was like, the most statistically likely thing to happen to someone of our age is that they will have a car accident and die. Or like the most statistical cause of death for someone our age would be a car accident. So he was like, thank you for not driving distraught, for asking people to help you and not putting yourself at risk in that way.
I'm glad that interaction felt good for you. I I told I told Christine like the week of too, like there were moments where I was stressed out about, how things were going. I think there were moments where people were struggling with lines later in the process, which again, super understandable given everything that's happening in the world in our personal lives and, the fires and people being distracted and also just being adults with regular lives and social lives and work and everything. And
Mhm.
so I completely understand not having time to memorize lines, but it was stressing me out. The little theater degree person in me was really like, but I want it to be a certain way at certain times. I said to Christine, I said to my partners at certain points during the process too, I'm trying really hard to focus on the fact that 5 years from now, my friends who are in the show aren't going to remember what their lines were, if they remembered all of their lines, if they knew their blocking. They're going to remember how the show made them feel, and they're going to remember how they felt performing with their friends. They're going to remember feeling proud. They're going to remember, seeing their family members after. They're going to remember visuals of the show and bits and pieces. And that's more important to me than the lines
Mhm.
and the blocking. And as much as that's part of the process, that's not the important result.
Yeah.
Although, speaking of lines, can I just mega shout out Jamie, who I was blown away on just 24 hours notice, stepped in as an understudy and, like, miraculously, by the time of performing, knew all of
All of
Asteria.
them.
I think I just learned them through osmosis. Like, we mentioned earlier that like during the rehearsal process, Christine and I occasionally traded off, but we're usually present for both rehearsals. But just the
Scheduling-wise,
circumstances,
Asteria's rehearsals had fallen on a couple of Mondays, and that's a day that
yeah,
I'm available, so Jamie had been primary on that scene and
for
just
multiple rehearsals.
made you more familiar with it than any other scene.
Because I was thinking the day of the show, once I realized I was running lines with my scene partner, with a serious scene partner during the day while we're like blowing up balloons and getting things ready for the show and running lines. And I'd made like a little, or not even me, my partner Taryn made me a little cheat sheet script, just like the cue word or cue phrase from the line before and then my line so that I wasn't carrying the full script with me on stage.
Mhm.
And I was fully prepared to go on stage with that. And then I was running lines with Kit and I realized like, oh, I don't think I need this. I think I know these lines. That's weird. How do I know these lines? And I don't think I know any other scene in the show. I don't think I could have done that. I think I would have been on book for any other scene in the show. I think it just got somewhat lucky that that was the role that I was filling in for, and it was easier to pick that up. But I was proud of myself for that too.
Yeah. I was proud of you too, just observing.
Yeah. It
Um,
was fun. It was a little bit of adrenaline,
yeah.
but it was a fun scene to fill in for, and it was, I think, an important scene in the show, an important scene for the show to end on. And so we really wanted to keep it, and that was like the natural
Mhm.
choice.
Because there was another one that we had cut
Yeah.
previously, but
Yeah, we did cut one, and this was like one of the more lighthearted
this was.
ones.
Yeah, it was really
It was really sweet. It's a really like happy one to end on. I think the playwright's notes mentioned something about like this is the only like truly happy ending scene in the show. Everything else is is a little ambiguous or it's mixed.
Mhm.
We're like, yeah, it's a happy ending, but there's tinges of like, but what happens next? This is the only one where you don't really have a whole lot of that.
Mhm.
And I really didn't want to lose it. So I'm glad that it worked out to keep it in the show and just go with the flow. And the show must go on. And everybody's stepped up and made it happen. We used the lav, figured out whether we needed the mics that fit under all the clothes because of how many clothes are ripping off. And that was it was very fun.
Yeah.
Um,
So we're getting close to where we should wrap up here. But what would you guys tell other people that wanted to put on plays with their friends, with a community, or want to create a collaborative art project? What would you say?
Other than get a big backyard.
yeah. If you can get a space.
It doesn't have
I
to be a
mean, my
traditional
advice
space.
to like myself 4 months ago would
Mhm.
maybe be don't be afraid to lean on people more,
Yeah.
right? That whole theme of you're not imposing. And to that end, find a stage manager. But yeah, don't be afraid to lean into other people are going to be, excited to do it. And I would hope that anybody else who's wanting to do this kind of a project has or can foster that kind of community that will step up and take on those roles. I, like Christine mentioned, now that we did a production, now that we have like proof of concept and people saw it and was like, oh, this is a real show. It has like lights and sound and mics and actors who are good. And we had a couple people reach out either the night of or I think after in some cases too, being like, hey, if you need a stage manager in the future, I used to be a stage manager and I don't do it anymore, but I will for you. And that is going to be very helpful if we do this again in the future.
Yeah. Okay, tell us what a stage manager does because I think it's one of the unsung heroes of the theater.
They do a lot. They help with so many aspects of running the show. They're kind of like the show runner in a lot of ways. Like they are the people who have the big book and know all of the aspects of the show. They're kind of coordinating the different technical aspects of the show. So the director's job is to pull together a vision for the set and the costumes and the actors and take all these pieces and artistically make them gel and have a cohesive look and feel. And the stage manager's job is like that, but a little bit more of the technical side. So have all the schedules be cohesive, have, make sure that the tech people are talking, the lighting designers talking to the costume designer about colors and making sure that the way the stage is going to be lit, the costumes are going to read like they're supposed to, and coordinating with actors, giving,
Things are
um,
prop table and like that.
yeah, they're sending out the like call sheet type things of letting people know when rehearsals are and what time things are and making announcements. And, they're very much like the coordinator. They're labeling the prop table. They're making sure the props are in place before the show starts. They're making sure actors are in place before the show starts and that they know when their cues are. They're often the ones calling the show, meaning that they usually have a microphone on and coordinating with other technical team members about, okay, and go for that. And this light cue now. And curtains up and calling that. So there's a lot to it. There's more than that, even.
Yeah.
But they are, yeah, they are the people responsible for making sure everything happens
Runs
smoothly and fluidly
smoothly
on their time.
behind the scenes. Everything runs smoothly behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Everything happens
director,
safely on time.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Directors
so
make
those were
sure
hats that
everything
Christy and I were also wearing throughout the production and night of I was sort of technical directing and Christine was sort of stage managing.
Mhm.
And, we both kind of shared responsibilities within that still, but having a third person whose job was to do those things would have made it a lot easier for us to sit back and focus on the parts that are more quote unquote our jobs as
Mhm.
directors. And also just help a lot of those things go more smoothly and take things off our plates. I'm not a scheduling person. Christine is the one with the calendar, and that's not usually me, but I did a lot more scheduling than I normally do. And I think it went fine. I was more on top of it than I expected I would be. but it would have been a lot easier on my mental load and would have made certain things go more smoothly. I'm sure I might not have dropped the ball with certain rehearsal dates being available and then not scheduling something, things like that, if we'd had somebody a little bit more dedicated to stage managing.
Sure. Christine, did you have something to add?
No, I don't know. We were talking over each other, but I don't remember what it was now. Sorry.
Okay, cool. It's okay. Christine, what would you tell people that are trying to do a production in their
Oh,
backyard?
well, we're still getting to that. What would I tell people? I mean, I guess for people that are listening to it, like to this podcast, happy to bounce ideas if you have specific questions. But in general, I just think like go for it. You can make things happen. I've always felt like that about the creative projects that I want to do. You know, I've made multiple short films and a feature film and now backyard theater, and I just think yeah, it's hard, but it's so rewarding, and find find what you have and build off of that. So
Mhm.
I actually that maybe is more specific advice. So maybe the resource that you have is not the big backyard, but you find something unique to you and then figure out what you can do with it. Like when I made my feature film, we had access to a house in Maryland that had a dock on the Chesapeake Bay. And we were like, we will write movie around that location because then it's going to be a cheap indie movie, but it's not going to be on somebody's couch in their living room.
Mhm.
And likewise with this show, the seed was Jamie saying, what do I have? I have a large backyard. What can I do with my large backyard? So take a look at what you have and start there and figure out like what you can make. Because I think that if you are resource minded in like, you know, what are the resources I have within my community? What are the people I have within my community? And then that can give you ideas of what you can build upon.
Yeah. Awesome.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that. I loved also the go for it, you can make it happen is good advice in general. Is that
I I think one of the things I said to Christine after the show wrapped and people left and we were just in the living room decompressing was it was really neat, the feeling of having an idea and seeing it all the way through to something at the end, and that sort of empowering feeling of I can just do things that I have the idea to do. And it was neat to go from, oh, I was thinking about this on a car ride in August and starting to picture like how I would want a set to look and what things would look like. And then it actually happened and I think impacted people and hopefully came at a time when they needed artistic expression and something to do and have a creative outlet. But that just do it. Just find a way to do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be great. Ours, I'm so proud of it. It wasn't perfect.
But it was
Uh,
great.
it was
it
great.
was great. It wasn't perfect, but it was great. Do you guys have anything you're here to promote?
Self-efficacy.
Yeah.
Oral hygiene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brush your teeth.
Excellent.
This is
Um,
back
Yeah.
to our SLP backgrounds. Did
Yep.
you know that dental health is important to us?
mhm.
Excellent content.
It's both good for your cardiovascular health, and if you ever have a swallowing disorder, it will prevent you from getting aspiration pneumonia.
Great. Thank you guys so much for coming on
You're welcome.
and having me play. We'll end on that one,
Yeah.
and I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to Asteria's Convos. You can find the links for this episode in the episode description. You can find me, Asteria Elzea, on TikTok, Instagram, and Threads as at asteria.elzea and on Blue Sky as at Asteria Elzea. Spell it Asteria dot ELZEA. A. Please leave a review on your favorite podcast hosting service. That's the absolute best way for our community to grow. Remember, your actions create the future. All my love, Asteria Elzea.